Look at the book of Ephesians, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, chapter 4, starting in verse 22. And this is one of the more famous descriptors that Paul taught about how the early church was to live around sin. It says in verse 22, and that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to deceitful lust. Verse 23, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Verse 24, put on the new man which is created in righteousness. Put off, be renewed, put on. So put off, there are things every day in our lives we need to put off. Then we get into the Word and get renewed. We ask God to renew our minds, like Romans 12, 1 and 2, by the renewing of your mind. You may prove what is that good. And then we put on. So basically the Christian life is putting off something, being renewed on the operating system, and putting on something. So much like getting ready in the morning. You get up, you take off your dirty clothes, you jump in the shower, you put on your clean clothes. Now that's simple. What happens to someone that doesn't put off their dirty clothes and doesn't take a shower and doesn't put on their new clothes? Well, if you sit by them in class, you start noticing and you start going, something wrong? What is that? You see, when we don't follow the basic sanctification steps, the odor of our life begins to betray the fact that we're living not like a new creation in Christ. And sooner or later, our mind starts thinking that the Bible's too hard to read. I don't get anything out of it. And pretty soon we start feeling like an unsaved person. I was a pastor for decades in America. Started in Georgia, continued from there to South Carolina, then I went to California, then I went to Rhode Island, then I went to Oklahoma, and ended up finishing my pastoral years in Michigan. Do you know what the most common question that people, they would make an appointment, come to my office, and they'd say, I have a Bible question. And finally, when the door shut, they'd look at me and they say, I don't feel like I'm saved. I go, oh, well, was there ever a time you were saved? Oh, yes. I said, so if you're really saved, you can't lose your salvation. What you're telling me is you don't feel saved now. And that's what it was. And do you know what it was? There were always, 100% of the time, there were things that gradually came back from their old life they wouldn't put off. Their mind got confused. They weren't renewed. They weren't putting on the helmet of salvation, so they didn't even feel like a Christian. That's what was going on in the church in Pergamos. What did Paul say in Titus 2, 11, 12, and 13? He said this, for the grace of God that brings salvation. So the justifying work of Christ opens for me the sanctifying life of Christ. The grace of God that brings salvation teaches us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, godly. Soberly, righteously, godly in this present world. Putting off, being renewed, putting on. How? The grace of God. The same grace that brought us salvation teaches us to deny ungodliness. Justification is salvation brought to us. Sanctification is denying ungodliness. What happens to people who are saved that don't do that? They get to heaven empty-handed. Very sobering message.